On to our award and our well-deserved recipient. I mentioned it last night, that in 1984 the foundation began the Man of Achievement program to recognize brothers who've risen to prominence in their fields, and these brothers provide us with inspiring examples of how we, as brothers, are committed to serving society. And as you have come to expect, we have another wonderful video to share a little bit more about Brother Bob Basso, this driven video. Thank you.
Sorry about the traffic jam here, but
this is great. We're getting smooth shots.
Okay. Well, just so you know, you are now true San Franciscans commuting to the East Bay. I remember the very first thing that they taught you as a pledge is you will not walk across campus or go to an event or sit in a classroom away from another brother if a brother is there. You go out of your way. And I think we all misunderstood what that meant. We thought it was kind of harassment. What it meant was, it's a brotherhood. Teaching you to be a brother, teaching you, you don't know. You might go up to that brother who needs you at that moment in time. And that has stayed with me probably till this day. It's the camaraderie. It really is a brotherhood. Relying on each of those brothers for support, confidence, assistance, help, is the start of what they're going to do in society anyway. And the more you can rely on your fellow man, the better off you are. And the more you can provide to your fellow man, the better off you are. And I think in the fraternity, that's what it is. I'm Bob Basso, and I thank you for giving me the opportunity to show my brothers my San Francisco.
One of the great things about the Man of Achievement and all of our awards is that we open nominations and encourage you to be thinking of outstanding brothers. And so it's very fitting tonight that the brother who very wisely nominated Bob for this award is going to share a little bit more about him, and that is our 2011 Man of Achievement, Nick Scalera. Nick?
Not that tall. As we saw on the screen, Phi Kappa Theta's Man of Achievement Award recognizes brothers who have risen to prominence in their particular field of endeavor. With over 45 years of executive experience in the financial services sector, Brother Bob Basso of California truly fits the bill. Bob was initiated into New Jersey Phi Beta chapter at Seton Hall University. And all throughout this conference, I've been asked, where is Seton Hall? It's in New Jersey. Very close to Newark, New Jersey, and the airport. In college, Brother Basso served as pledge class president, as pledge master of the chapter, and he was elected to the Student Senate for a 3-year term. In his senior year, Bob represented Seton Hall at the United Nations, a program that included students from universities throughout the world. After graduating from Seton Hall with a BS in business in 1967, Bob received an MBA from Pace University. From 1969 to 1971, he served with the U.S. Army, including a 13-month tour of duty in Vietnam. Bob began his Wall Street career with Loeb, Rhodes and Company. Later, he held senior executive positions at Merrill Lynch, UBS Payne Weber, Fidelity Investments, National Financial Services, and Correspondence Services Corporation. Lured to the Golden State to pursue a business offer in 1981, Bob met and married Mary Healy, and they remained in California to raise their family. I'm happy to say they're all here with us tonight. Would you all stand, members of Bob's family, Mary, Bobby, and Johnny? Although Bob left New Jersey and traveled to California, he is truly an authentic Jersey boy. He grew up in Point Pleasant Beach on the Atlantic coast. It's a seashore town with a traditional wooden boardwalk, maybe not even wooden anymore, I'm not sure, amusement rides, games of chance, and vendors selling world-famous Jersey taffy. Brother Basso has been a trustee of several academic institutions, including St. Raphael School in San Rafael, California, and Marin Catholic High School in Kentfield, California. Upon his retirement in 2007, Bob founded Best Partners, which is an independent financial services consulting company. And later, he was director of Poniard Pharmaceuticals, a publicly traded firm. In 2000, Bob and Mary founded the Basso Healy Foundation. This is a nonprofit that assists youth-based education and social services agencies to provide scholarships to needy students. Bob is also a very generous donor to Seton Hall University, New Jersey Phi Beta chapter, where he was initiated, and to the Phi Kappa Theta National Foundation. He is a longtime member of the Seton Hall Board of Regents. In 2010, Brother Basso created the Basso Healy Endowed Scholarship to help Marin Catholic High School students attend Seton Hall. And being a typical Jersey boy, we always travel in packs. So with us tonight are some of Bob's roommates from college and Pledge Brothers. Why don't you all please stand? Let's give them a round of applause, too. I want to point out that I said that Jersey boys travel in groups, not gangs. So I want to get that straight. But I'm very proud, very privileged to introduce to you a very loyal Phi Cap, an icon in the field of finance, a very generous philanthropist, a devoted husband and father, and a true servant leader. Please join me in recognizing my dear friend and brother, Robert S. Basso, as Phi Kappa Theta's Man of the Year.
Wow. Where do you begin? First of all, Nick, you stole my thunder. We didn't compare notes, and he said, I'll kind of go briefly over your background so you don't have to tell that to anybody. And so, but I do thank you for that over the top introduction. And Jeff, to you, and Rob, and everybody else in the Phi Kappa Theta Foundation, thank you for this esteemed honor. Never in my wildest dreams would I've ever thought that I'd be looking here. That's okay. That's all right. Okay. Never I thought, my wildest dreams that I ever thought that I'd be standing here before you tonight, because what I've done in my life is neither unique or extraordinary. Certainly not in comparison to some of the things that we've heard today in the session and some of my peers that have been on this stage before me. And so many of you here this weekend. St. Thomas Aquinas' eloquently simple admonishment and our beloved fraternity motto, give, expecting nothing thereof, is why we're all gathered here tonight. Yet in some ways, some respects, it seems that I've received so much, culminating with this truly unexpected honor. My fondest memories of college life and the lifelong friendships I've been blessed with have all come because of this fraternity. Giving back is perhaps the most important lesson we can ever learn, but clearly one that's not imparted in the classroom. It's in everyday life. It's the examples that we set. And for me, those examples were my parents. Back in that sleepy little town that Nick referred to, Point Pleasant Beach, it was the kind of a town that people really did. Everyone knew your name. In fact, sometimes it was not so good that they knew your name because they'd call your mother before you got home. But when you look at it, community service was a way of life. They had to do it. Everything was a volunteer, in those days, a volunteer organization. My father was an extraordinary man. He started an automobile business in the late 40s. And that was a difficult business because they didn't make cars after the war until 1948, and he started in 1947. He said, I would work with my father in the showroom or the shop. Probably work is not the right word. I'd get in his way, just because I wanted to spend time with him. But there's where I hear, excuse me, it was there that I observed up close and personal what honesty, integrity, and I guess management best practices in today's jargon would be. He taught me what true customer service was all about, something that I kept with me in my entire career. I often wondered why a small dealership in New Jersey could exist in a little hometown of about 2,000 people. In reality, he was competing with people located on the highways. And it was because of his ability to keep customers. When I say customers, there were generations of customers. They would only do business with him. And giving back was amazing. Besides helping raise 2 children, only one of which had a discipline problem, so you might guess who that is, he always found some time to give back. He became a civic leader and an inspiration to countless others, both old and young. He was affectionately known as Uncle Roy to generations. He was an active Rotarian, a Paul Hobbs Fellow. He was a volunteer for the First Aid, which was one of the original first responders. And in those days, the siren would go off about 2 blocks from our house. And it could be in the middle of the night. He and several others would get up, and they'd jump in the rig and maybe save someone's life, take a cat out of a tree, but that's what they did. And as the years went by, on Sundays he would sing in the choir, just to put it in perspective. As the years went by, he managed somehow to find time to serve on and lead the town council, a post that also included him being the fire commissioner and the police commissioner. Growing up in a town where your father was the fire commissioner, police commissioner, sometimes was not the best thing in the world. Okay. He then caught a break and he was elected mayor. Still later on, he became chairman of the board of the local hospital. And all of those positions were part-time, with no compensation other than the respect and the gratitude of his community. And my mother, well, all she did besides raise my sister and I, which was the real challenge, was she would continually volunteer at the schools. We went to separate schools. She would volunteer at both. She became a leader in the PTA and the local Girl Scout troops. And then when my father became chairman of the hospital, which was a volunteer position, she became a full-time volunteer and served there for most of the remaining years of her life, many years after my father passed away. So you see, by the time I arrived at Seton Hall, giving back and being of service were second nature to me. By pure luck, there were hometown friends who not only attended the university, but were also Phi Kappas. And so I guess I was rushed before I ever set foot on campus. But once I did, Phi Kappa became, and remains to this day, the single most important part of my college experience and the reservoir of my fondest memories. A true service fraternity, its brothers seem to serve or be involved with every facet of university life. Bright and talented, they all seemingly were student leaders who inspired, cajoled, and probably compelled all of us, all the young pledges and new brothers, to do likewise. And Brother Scalera is a shining example of that, to lead the way. And I'm reminded of those service days each and every time I step foot on campus today, in service as a regent to the university, and prior to that on the President's Advisory Council that we worked on. The joy and pride I feel in being able to give back to my alma mater. As Nick mentioned, I served on the student council and some fraternity positions. I also took a page out of his playbook on the media side and did a radio program. It was the lowest rated program in New Jersey, I might add. It did have 2 constant listeners, my mother and my father. But okay, other than that. But, you know, it's funny. Life teaches you some very valuable lessons. Sometimes a win is a loss, and sometimes a loss is a huge win. And sometimes service means something else. In my senior year, I thought I was going to be the president of the school. Instead, I lost to another fraternity brother. And with that loss, the school asked me if I would serve as the ambassador to the United Nations for the school. That one instance did 2 things. It exposed me to an international view of life that I had never envisioned, the global environment that I could never have imagined. And little did I know that it would be the seminal event for the rest of my life in New York City, because it taught me how to go into New York City on a daily basis. The old line that life happens when you're busy making plans probably is exemplified in my life as well. Something that I've always tried to impart on young undergraduates today. You can make all the plans in the world that you want, but you have to deal with reality when life, whatever cards life deals you with. My plan upon graduation was to accept a very attractive, in those days, management training program with an insurance company, and then go into the National Guard and maybe at some point in time go into business with my father. Well, it was in transit. 2 things happened. The war in Vietnam escalated, and there was a sergeant as Ray knows, in the National Guard unit that declined me. And overnight, I started to, 1, take the GMATs, 2, apply to any graduate school that I possibly could, and 3, pray. What transpired was when your life gets turned upside down, you learn some very valuable lessons. My selection of, or criteria for selecting graduate school was the first school that would write me the matriculation letter. And it happened to be Pace University in New York, which again, everything is a coincidence in this world maybe. Because once I was accepted to Pace and once they wrote the letter, I needed a job. And I was telling Jeff before, I've applied for 2 jobs in my lifetime, one at that insurance company, and the next was on Wall Street. And I looked for a job, any job, that would allow me or be close enough to pay so I could go to school every night and be a full-time student. And from a career perspective, it could not have worked out any better. Neither planned nor thought out. I interviewed with 3 firms, one of which, believe it or not, was Goldman Sachs. And in what would be an unbelievably fortuitous and albeit pretty dumb decision now, I said no to Goldman and instead took a similar position doing absolutely anything they wanted me to do for $100 a week because that was my rent, with a firm called, as Nick said, Loeb Rhodes. And Goldman Sachs is, well, Goldman Sachs, and Loeb Rhodes is no longer with us for many years. But back then it was a very special firm. It was an international investment banking firm that had what was known as a correspondent clearing division, a who's who of regional brokerage and banking firms as clients. And very soon I became familiar with all of them. And that singular, instinctive, rather than planned employment decision and the resulting interactions with those firms virtually made my career. I was eventually drafted, as Nick said, went to Vietnam and came back. But I went over as a military policeman. Taught me the other thing about service. Luckily, I wasn't in combat, but I was assigned to a personnel unit in Long Binh, and that was a large installation in Vietnam. And my assignment was to check in and check out the soldiers coming through, passing through in the battalion. And so what I was able to do is serve again to gentlemen that gave their all for this country. I was able to teach them about their options and their rights and their benefits being in the service, and even help some of them get out of the service that shouldn't have been there. When I returned to the States to resume my now nascent Wall Street career, little did I realize that the service and leadership skills that were ingrained for me from childhood, honed through my Seton Hall days, and later the military, would soon be recognized in a industry level. At Loeb, even when I returned from Vietnam, I was referred to as the kid, the one that they would ask to do anything that none of the partners wanted to do, probably could do. I always thought that was an intriguing way to build a career, because I figured if I was asked, it meant two things. One, no one wanted to do it, or they had done it and failed, and I couldn't lose, could only win. But one of those challenging assignments led directly to one of those inexplicable coincidences. I was instructed to provide information for the correspondent business to a think tank, a management consulting firm, ironically from California, called Stanford Research, or SRI. Now, SRI had been engaged by a major Wall Street name to look at this business. They wanted a white paper on the clearing business. That SRI client turned out to be Merrill Lynch, now called Bank of America Merrill Lynch. And where Merrill took SRI's advice and decided to get in the business, their natural question was, well, who can we get to run it? And they said, well, there's this kid over at Loeb Rhodes, and that was me. And the rest, you can assume the rest of the story. They made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And for an Italian, and you saw the way I spoke on the right, I'm not speaking with my hands because I have to look at the script. Okay. That was back in 1976. But within 4 short years, the business had grown so rapidly due to no small measure to the proliferation of technology and regulatory changes that were taking place in the industry, that the decision was made to open additional offices, one in the Midwest and then on the West Coast. The first was in Chicago, and then in early '81, San Francisco. And as Nick said, which just happened to be the home of my best friend, Mary Healy. So besides opening the office, I relocated to the city by the bay and commenced what would be then a bicoastal existence for the next quarter century. Perhaps the strangest irony of all is that what we did and actually sold and produced, and I thought better than anyone else, was service, 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 what we learned in the fraternity. And remembering the lessons of my father as to customer care, treatment, and retention, our clients became more than clients. Many became friends, even to this day, and some later became clients of our consulting firm, simply because the decisions that we made always was first in the best interest of those firms and their clients. The other lesson I took to heart was to become involved as an active participant in as many industry associations and organizations that serve the financial services sector that I could. But therein, expecting nothing more than perhaps the sense of accomplishment in serving the industry and business community, not to mention our clients, I was instead incredibly rewarded with industry recognition, certainly beyond my contributions. Without realizing it, I soon became a recognized industry spokesperson and surprisingly a leader. And in a tribute of sorts, I guess, and deference to my Italian heritage, I came to be known as the Godfather, although I preferred grandfather, even though I was young, of the clearing business. And to this day, although I've been retired for a dozen years, I am fascinated when I meet a young individual in the business who will make the association and will make the reference. Aren't you the godfather of the clearing business? It's amazing. After I moved to California got married, and started a family, community service actually became an even larger part of my life, as it should be for all of us. Whereas prior to probably the almost constant travel and exceedingly long days limited my community involvement, the time now spent away from my family on those weekly and biweekly transcontinental flights only incentivized me to give back in ways that would allow me to not only serve the community, but be able to spend time, maybe more time with my family, either that or at least be involved somewhat more in their lives. So I became a member of the boards of their schools, as Nick mentioned, chaired several of them for many years, and still serve on the boards today. I may be the oldest board regent of a high school and university in the country that's bi-coastal, but it works. I even coached, or perhaps more accurately, tried to help coach their CYO, basketball, Little League, and soccer teams. I even became president of the local homeowners association. I had indeed become my father's son. So there you have it, the blueprint, as it were, for the commitment, involvement, and service, both business and personal, which has somehow placed me here before you tonight. And I know that I've gone on far too long, but in closing, I would like to add that while I hold sacred and held sacred, give expecting nothing in return, in reality, expecting nothing, I have received so much. From my earliest Phi Kappa days until the present, so much more than I could ever imagine, let alone expected, from lifelong friendships to opportunities and experiences I could never have possibly envisioned. I've also been truly blessed with an unbelievably caring, understanding, and loving and eternally forgiving wife, the aforementioned Mary Healy, as Nick said, who put up with so much over the years, the constant travel, the countless hours away, the late night calls from strangers, the vacation seemingly always interrupted by the next issue or client crisis. And with two incredible sons, Bobby and Johnny, who are also with us tonight, who, despite my coaching inabilities, not to mention my prolonged absences, have grown to be strong, caring, and themselves giving young men who inspire me each and every day. And lastly, with fraternity brothers, some of whom, as you know, are with us this evening, who have remained as close as any set of real brothers, could possibly be. For 55 years. I can get through this last line. I expected nothing but have received the world. But there is just one more piece to all of this, and that is there's one other soon-to-be brother. And after tonight, you will become a real brother. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.